So it looks as though the Philadelphia 76ers are out on Paul George and they will not be pursuing him in NBA free agency. We're talking about that on today's 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Hope all of you out there getting set to have a great weekend. And let's start off with this poll question here because the comment section has been a mixed bag every time we've talked about Paul George. Some people wanted him and want him. Some people don't. So what say you? Did you or do you want Paul George on the 76ers? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Shams Charania breaking the news on Thursday, June 20th, and that was yesterday as we're recording this show here, that the 76ers' interest in pursuing Paul George has significantly waned in recent days, and the franchise is expected to be aggressive elsewhere with its salary cap flexibility and draft capital heading into next week's NBA draft. Some takeaways on the Paul George front. You have to wonder with Paul George, what might have happened? Did James Harden convince Paul George that he shouldn't go to the 76ers because he shouldn't trust Daryl Morey? What caused this sudden change for Philadelphia? I doubt the Sixers all of a sudden just don't like the player, which is why I bring up that James Harden influence here. It's also possible that Philadelphia doesn't really like their chances of landing him. And we've talked about the reality of this throughout this offseason. Does Paul George really want to go from being in California as a Cali guy all the way across the country to Philadelphia? There's also been rumblings about Paul George struggling to deal with media groups and media markets that are intense when either he's on the road or there's some type of speculation out there. Also possible is that Philadelphia already has another plan in place. They have a player who they covet. They have a target who they're going to try to go after. They're looking at the free agency landscape, and they're convinced that whatever route they want to go is the route for Philadelphia in this instance here. And it doesn't involve Paul George. Now, this is also a couple of days after Joel Embiid was on the set on the NBA Finals Countdown show on ESPN, side-eyeing Paul George when talking about going after some external free agent targets. This news comes out less than a week after that. So, Chip, what do you make of it? We always kind of talked about Paul George most likely being unrealistic because we never thought he was going to come to Philadelphia. Things could also change going into next week. All these things are about leverage, but your takeaways on this?
Yeah, of course. Things always can change. It's not like there's 0% chance now that the Sixers go after Paul George, but it does seem like at this point in time they're going to be looking in other directions, and it's very interesting to me because, just a few days ago, he's their number one guy, and for months it's been Paul George is the number one guy on the Sixers list of targets they want to acquire this offseason. And it has been that way. And now all of a sudden, they're looking in other directions. Could it have been the James Harden comments to Paul George, which again was just earlier this week? Is it possible, one, that the Sixers think, okay, Paul George is staying, or there's also a twist to it where there's a little leverage play here where the Sixers don't want to give Paul George a max. The Clippers, we already know, don't want to give Paul George a max. It had been reported that Philly was fine with giving the max, but maybe they're not. And maybe now by coming out and saying, we're not really interested in him, now there's no pressure on the Clippers to pay him. So now the Clippers can offer him a lower deal, and maybe once free agency officially opens on June 30th, the Sixers come back in saying, you know what, maybe we do want to get back in on the Paul George sweepstakes, but the Clippers have lowered their offers, so now maybe the Sixers don't have to go out and give that max deal. It's very interesting. A lot of other targets as well that they're going to be interested in, but at this point in time, Paul George, who we've been talking about again for months, doesn't seem like he's going to be a Sixer next season.
And things can also change going into free agency, as we both alluded to. This is peak rumor season, and shocking things happen. Surprises do happen. I just have never really been of the belief that Paul George is really going to be a Sixer. So is passing on Paul George the right decision if that is the decision that Philadelphia is making here? R for right, W for wrong. Coming up next, where do the Sixers go from here? What should their offseason plan and outlook be? Stay tuned for that conversation on the other side. But these Sixers draft hats, they continue to be on sale. You can get yours today at chatsports.com/76ers draft hats. Plug in that link. It's all thanks to our friends at Fanatics. The color scheme, the look, it's awesome. You can go flat brim style or dad hat style. Both are available if you use that link down below. One thing we know for sure for Philadelphia, Sixers are going to spend their money. They have a lot of money to use. Here's what Zach Lowe of ESPN said. The Sixers are sitting there waiting. They're going to use this cap space one way or another. The Sixers are looming there as like, hey, we got to use it. It's like use it or lose it. Almost for us, Joel Embiid is right in his prime. His health has been unreliable. We've got to try to win. I do like to hear that Philadelphia is willing to be aggressive. According to Kai Carlin of USA Today, the Sixers expected to re-sign Kelly Oubre, Nick Batum, Kyle Lowry. I don't think that should come as a surprise to anybody because Nick Nurse, Joel Embiid, Daryl Morey, they've all talked about having that continuity and running it back with some of those pieces from last year. That could help the continuity's sake. Now, what options does Philadelphia have to spend their wealth of cap space on? Option A, you spend big money on one player that you think can be a reliable third option, a la not Tobias Harris. The big money targets in free agency here, these are either in free agency or by way of a trade. LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, Mikal Bridges, Lauri Markkanen, Brandon Ingram, OG Anunoby, DeJounte Murray. There's been a couple of reports this week in the latter half of it that Jimmy Butler will get traded. So of those trade targets there, obviously some really good ones. You have some older superstars in KD, Butler. You have a middle-of-the-road superstar, not superstar, but borderline all-star in DeJounte Murray. You have the great fit and a young player, Mikal Bridges. You have the older player you could sign in LeBron James. An intriguing piece to trade for in Lauri Markkanen. Brandon Ingram is still young. OG Anunoby might require an overpay. So a bunch of different options there for the Sixers. Not many top-tier free agents out there. This crop, unfortunately, it's a little bit thin. So if you want a star, most likely going to happen via a trade. And according to Shams, the Sixers will be aggressive in the trade market. And they can use their draft picks at their disposal because they don't have a lot of players. Pretty much no players that they could dangle as trade bait. The Sixers do continue to be linked to Brandon Ingram. After being linked to Zach LaVine, those reports have been kind of walked back on as far as the Sixers' interest. And there are local Sixers reporters who are saying Philadelphia isn't going to go after Zach LaVine. I tend to trust the Kyle Neubeck, who has a great pulse of this organization, sources inside the organization, as compared to Chicago reporters or national reporters. Kyle Neubeck spoke to a league source who said the Sixers' position on Zach LaVine has not changed since the trade deadline. Philadelphia not interested in pursuing. Jake Fisher on this. LaVine remains merely a backup option for the Sixers, sources said, but not a player who Philadelphia truly covets with the team's ocean of cap space. Which brings me to this. Look, if the reports are true that Jimmy Butler is going to get dealt, and Jimmy Butler has a say for where he goes, has a lot of hard miles on him, and a lot of overall mileage, getting older, has an injury history, but my goodness, if you're trying to chase a title over the next couple of years and you're trying to dethrone the Boston Celtics, Jimmy Butler has taken down the Boston Celtics. Howard Beck of The Ringer saying Jimmy Butler will be traded. Rival executives have been buzzing about it for months for all the obvious reasons. Butler is about to turn 35 with a lot of hard miles and a lot of injuries. He's saying he will be traded. I mean, that's a definitive statement right there. To say that Jimmy Butler will be dealt. You had the comments from Pat Riley earlier this offseason. Then Pat Riley said, we're not going to give away Jimmy Butler. Again, you just never know. Going back to the juicy rumor cycle that is the NBA offseason. Option B, following option A, is you surround Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey with multiple role-filling players. We talked yesterday about the Sixers' reported interest in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You can make a trade for Malcolm Brogdon, trade for Dorian Finney-Smith, Gary Trent Jr., Obi Toppin, Kevon Looney, Andre Drummond, all unrestricted free agents. Jordan Clarkson, scoring punch off the bench, that's a trade target. Caleb Martin has a player option. And then Kyle Anderson, an unrestricted free agent. Unfortunately, a player who Chip and I covet, Alex Caruso, traded to the Thunder in exchange for Josh Giddey. That's a move that makes OKC better. And with Alex Caruso, what did I say? Smart organizations and championship organizations are going to go after him. OKC fits that bill. Malik Monk, no longer a free agent, signing a 4-year, $78 million deal with the Sacramento Kings. A lot of dough for him, just under $18 million. And the Sixers, as I noted, have been linked to KCP. So there are plenty of options out there as far as trade and free agency. The trade market is a little bit better because the free agency market doesn't have that star. But what's the right direction for Philadelphia here, Chip?
Yeah, I'd rather them, go out and sign a star, sign a good free agent, and then use their trade assets. It just makes more sense cap-wise because you can use up pretty much all your money and then go over the cap when you're bringing in guys if you're trading away salaries.
Yeah.
It's tough at this point, though, because, again, as we mentioned, you're looking at free agency. Unless LeBron opts out, there's not very many likely options, right?
James Harden.
Yeah, James Harden.
Klay Thompson.
The best free agent might be Tyrese Maxey, who is technically a free agent, restricted. Of course, the Sixers will bring him back.
Yeah.
The Jimmy Butler buzz kind of died down for a little bit. Now it's starting to pick back up. I wouldn't be too surprised if that's the move the Sixers are keeping their eyes on. Because, again, when we mention that they're not in on Paul George anymore, to me that means they have their sights set somewhere else. They have a plan, and they've heard things. Maybe they're having conversations as well with other teams in these trade discussions. And now we've seen the first trade of the offseason already be made. So that can kind of kick things into gear here. So is it a Jimmy Butler? Is it a Brandon Ingram? Out of all the options, I think those two are probably the most likely. Would love Mikal Bridges, but that seems unlikely for now because of the Brooklyn Nets' unwillingness to move him. Lauri Markkanen, hasn't been much buzz around the Jazz being willing to move him. Kevin Durant, the Suns have said, we're not going to move him, even though it'll probably be smart for their organization and their long-term future to do so. So at this point, I think it's going to come down to the Sixers making a big-time trade. I think either Jimmy Butler, who, again, getting older, injury history, going to cost you a lot of money.
Yep.
Definitely a risk there. Not, the same situation when he was here a few years back. Or it could be Brandon Ingram. Younger guy, entering the final year of his deal, going to have to pay him $50 million as well. Has some of his own injury concerns. How does he fit with this team? We'll see. Probably one of those two players, and then maybe you fill out the roster again, one of these role guys. A KCP would be amazing. And then, of course, what happens with the draft pick? Do you move the 16th overall pick this year? Do you hold on to it and trade future draft capital? And then you can add somebody with the 16th overall pick that can help your squad. We'll see, but a lot of options opening now if the Paul George front isn't going to be happening.
So that's our view on the direction for Philadelphia, and they can go in a multitude of directions. We're about to hop on out of here, but first, if you're still hanging out here and rocking with us, Real One roll call, baby. Type Real One down below. Means that you're subscribed, you watch the show, and you watch the entire video. We want to show you some love for showing us some love. Have a great weekend. Content still to come throughout this weekend. Get caught up on everything that we've talked about this week right here on 76ers Now.